I think that's what they call a Bluetooth frame rail. Well, Mazda fans, we got us a 92 B2200 Extended Cab. So all you B-Series Mazda truck owners out there, be thankful if you live out of the Rust Belt. So this tubular cross member that holds the gas tank in always rots out on these trucks, and it's very common to put a piece of tubing in where the old one was. When I was banging around on that shock bracket, I discovered that whoever put this tube in didn't even weld it. So I was banging around. They just took an old piece of fence pipe and drove it in there. So, you know, desperate times makes for desperate measures, right? probably the third time I've cleaned up since I started rattling this rusty mess around. Okay, let me show you what I've been up to. I wanted to make a fixture that allowed me to accurately locate frame rails as they were made. So I'm going to completely remove the frame rail all the way under the cab. You can really see the damage. And what that means is I've got to extend the tubing all the way up under the cab. So as I come back, and I wanted to make sure that I didn't have to chase the mounts for the bed around, and I didn't want to have to chase the position of the width of the rails. The height of the rails from the ground are going to be supported by these cross members. Same thing with the little stops welded on here, and the rails will sit on top of these. And what I'm doing is, because you know the potential of hot rodding this truck exists too, I've made this fixture to go from this bed rail mount to this bed rail mount. And what it does is it allows me to locate the side of the frame, and then I have another piece of angle iron here. Where are you? I have another piece of angle iron. I am raising the top of the frame up 1 inch. This is 1 inch square tubing. So what I'll be able to do is when I get my middle section of the frame cut and ready to fit for welding, I'll C-clamp it to here, and I'll C-clamp it to these little verticals, and it'll hold it in position for me. And by raising this rail up, I'll gain some axle clearance when I lower the truck, and I am using thicker wall, thinner tubing than the factory. This is nearly 4 inches tall. I'm going to use 3 inch, but I'm using 1/8 inch wall rather than 90 wall that Mazda used. So I'm going to raise it up 1 inch. If I cut this out of the bed rail, there's my inch. Actually, it's a little more than 1 inch if you measure from here to here. So my frame will be raised up. I'll cut this back a little bit, and there'll be room for that raised frame rail to reach up without modifying the wheel tubs or anything. So today I've been running around tying the left sides to the right side with whatever angle iron I could find, and I specifically bought this 3/4 by 3/4 by 1/8 just to be little fixture support brackets. And I'm slowly, as you saw, cutting the brackets that I'm going to reuse off of the frame. I still got a few gallons of fuel to siphon out of the tank before I pull that out. Once that comes out, I'm going to actually go for this rail first, because I think it's going to be the most difficult one with the bracketry for the tank and such. So I'll try to keep you folks up to speed as how this goes. I'll let you know how I make out. Well, no Molotov cocktail or any explosions. The other thing I'm going to do is try and save the bracket. That's kind of why I cut the tube off. Had to come off anyway. And I'm going to replicate this out of the same thickness steel. That's a pretty easy thing to fabricate, so I'll use this as a template. So this is where the problem usually happens with the factory tanks. And actually, this doesn't look bad. This little stain here is PB Blaster I had sprayed. I'm trying to get that out, and it wasn't having anything to do with it. So I'll actually, while I just brush this up, I'll put some rust reformer on there, and that should help preserve it. I don't know, that looks a little thin right there. We'll have to really investigate this closely. So this tank probably was replaced, you know, more than 10 years ago, on my estimation. For this galvanizing to be already starting to go in the other direction, we'll see. I'm a little concerned about that right there. That could be getting real thin. This spot right here is a deep layer of rust that fell off, and usually that's where the porosity begins. I was in the shop last. I had just finished positioning these support tubes here. They go from the floor to the cab, and I was getting ready to weld them, and the power went out in the shop. So we got our power back. I'm back in the shop today, and I just tack welded them all together. And I don't know if you can tell or see, but I tied the legs going up to the cab across with a piece of angle iron, and then I tied the angle iron to the fixture that is supporting the whole rear of the frame. It's trying to prevent a situation where, you know, when you get this thing cut apart and you're slinging tubing around and you're grinding and cutting, I didn't want to kick or knock or drop something on the fixture and have it skid out of the way. And then everything I've done to take measurements has to be redone. So I'm just trying to make it so when I cut this apart, it's stable, it's not going to move, I don't have to chase it around, and it'll provide a good platform to get this thing back together level and square. Let the cutting begin. Time for a new cutting wheel. I had to do that, cut the rear shackles off so the rear end would come down and provide the front hangers were already busted away from the frame. We just the rear spring shackles were so tight that it wouldn't allow the front spring hangers to disconnect, even though they were completely rotted and actually crushed halfway through the frame. So, alright, so that should allow me to take one frame rail out at a time. Let's see how we make out. Alright, so this is why companies that choose to go with a box frame or even boxed in cross members, just ask the Chevy truck guys that are all replacing cross members, and Toyotas that have been warrantying frames for the last 10 years. All of that debris collects in the frame, and then it rots from the inside out, and you usually don't find out about it until it's a big surprise when you go to jack it up and the frame crushes or the truck folds in two. So I've supported the cab and the frame where I didn't cut it, so when I cut all of this stuff away, I supported the cab in a couple of locations back here, as you saw, and tied it all together. So when I cut all this away, it's not going to fall and drop. When I stitch it back into the new box tubing, it'll get back where it belongs, and the cab should settle right where it needs to be. I'm going to utilize the old spring hanger brackets. I got to get in and clean all of the old rusty metal off, and there's still good metal behind it. And I'm going to do that with the rear spring shackle bracket as well, including all of the bed mounts. Got my fixture to help me relocate them once I cut them all free from the frame. So the object is to continue to dice this frame up until I get this whole section out, and then I'm going to try to use this section as much of a template as I can to start mitering the cuts to put the 4x4 box tubing all the way up to somewhere in this area. Then it's going to reduce down to 2x3, and then it's going to come back and then drop down. 2x3 is going to continue all the way to the back bumper where the spring shackles used to go. Alright, I'm going to clean up this mess before I create another mess. Mess number 367. Come on under here for a second, folks. I want to show you something. So what I'm hoping to show you here is, obviously these box frames fill up with debris, and as that collects and settles in here and the road wash and stuff comes in and makes it wet, it rots from the inside out. One thing I discovered way back when I was making repairs to these frames is, first of all, I wanted to make sure that what I was doing was going to be safe, at least as strong as factory, if not stronger. So this is factory paint all the way across the top. There's still some factory paint. As a matter of fact, I took a burr machine and just scratched the surface on it, and it's shiny metal underneath. So the factory integrity of this frame, from basically an inch below the top down, is got its full integrity. And again, you can see, hopefully you can see, the factory paint on the top side of the frame. However, as you move your way back, and that debris, there's a, it ends up being a roadblock or a dam back here that allows the debris to collect, because it's coming from the raised portion or angled portion of the frame from over the rear axle down, so it heads in that direction, and then as it settles back from the front, the debris pile gets higher and higher and higher, and the rot is affected more and more and more. So that's why I am cutting the frame halfway between the torsion bar cross member and the center bearing cross member. I'm going to cut the frame completely off right here, and then I'm going to replace it with 2" by 4" by 1/8" wall box tubing, which is way stronger than the factory material. The outside of the frame is the thicker portion of the frame, and the inside portion of the frame I'd say is about 60 thousandths thick, and the outside is about 100 thousandths thick. So by putting 120 back in, both in the vertical walls, I'm basically reinforcing the frame and actually making it slightly stronger than the factory was. I'm grafting it into, it looks kind of like a mess right now, but it's on purpose because I've actually put a slice in the frame so I can plug weld the slip tube inside, and I've got this purposely pried down so I could get in there and clean it out. When the box tubing comes inside, I'll force this back into position and it'll all get welded back in. So the seam, not only am I making it at like a 45-degree angle and a nice generous radius, this will all get fully welded. I'm making the bending problem of patching a frame less severe because of the angled weld, and I'm also, where the seam would be, it's automatically getting reinforced because it's sharing the strength of the cross members. And I'll do the same, reattaching all of the cross members to the 2x4 box tubing. I think that's what they call a Bluetooth frame rail. Alright folks, that's going to do it for this video. If you're still with me, thanks. I really appreciate your time. And I know there's a ton of things you could be doing other than watching my videos. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. So thanks again. If you're still hanging in there, hit the subscribe button and the like button for me, would you? Thanks a lot. We'll see you in the next video.